This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Pendleton Whiskey, Bill Fick Ford, the WCRA, and Resistol. Born in the iconic American western town of Pendleton, Oregon, and taking its name from one of the most revered rodeos in the world, my absolute favorite rodeo, known for the grass, the Pendleton Roundup. Pendleton Whiskey is a modern celebration of a century-old tradition. Pendleton Whiskey is barrel-aged in American oak and cut with glacier-fed spring water from Oregon's Mount Hood. For an uncommonly smooth, rich taste and complex flavor, the Pendleton Whiskey brand honors a heritage that inspires us to live boldly, never lose sight of the values we believe in, and taste the moment, wherever we may be. The legacy of the American cowboy is forged in every single bottle. A taste of true Western tradition is always worth raising a glass to. Discover more at pendletonwhiskey.com. Oh, and Pendleton Whiskey is the official whiskey of Pro Rodeo and of the PBR. Pendleton Blended Canadian Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume, Pendleton Distilleries, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Please drink responsibly. Bill Fick Ford, the #1 Super Duty dealer in the entire country, is still taking care of their customers. It's hard to get trucks right now, but there's some perks when you're the #1 Super Duty dealer in the country. You still got trucks. Go to BillFickFordHuntsville.com to get the no bull discounts that no one else is giving during this crazy time that we're living in. Bill Fick Ford is still the place to go. In fact, if you ask me, it's the only place to get a new Super Duty dealer today. Bill Fick Ford. Who wants to be rodeo's next millionaire? It's time. That time again through the WCRA. You can win $1 million by nominating your rides or runs and earning points through the WCRA. Through the Triple Crown of Rodeo, the WCRA will award $1 million in cash prizes to any one athlete or collection of athletes who wins first place in any 3 consecutive WCRA major rodeos. $1 million is completely up for grabs. The Days of 47 Cowboy Games and Rodeo will be the second stop of the 2021 Triple Crown of Rodeo Series. The event will pay out over $560,000 and will be held July 20th through the 24th in Salt Lake City. Get this, there will be 0 entry fees, people. You heard me correctly. No entry fees. The only way to qualify for the Triple Crown of Rodeo event is by nominating your rides and runs with the WCRA. Use promo code GAUGE10 for 10% off your next nomination. Again, that promo code is GAUGE10 for 10% off your next nomination. To learn more, just visit WCRArodeo.com and learn how you can earn a spot at the Days of 47 Rodeo and possibly be rodeo's next millionaire. What?
What sets Resistol apart is the legacy of the cowboys who wear the brand. These traditions are passed down from fathers to sons, from heroes to future champions. Since 1927, Resistol has been handcrafting the finest American-made cowboy hats. Generation after generation, we live it every day.
This is The Gauge with host Chance Conradu.
Are you freaking serious? It's Conrado. Part 2, we got Andrea to stop doing the finger thing, but we opened up a whole nother can of worms. Check it out. All right, so we had just left off garage, sign, selling books, or maybe it was creating an online pay system. I don't know. I get you confused with Elon and
No,
Jeff Bezos. I'm not really sure.
There was no online on that day.
Yeah. Online books.
Yeah, no.
Mm-mm.
Different garage, different guy. My bad.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, a fellow employee and I, he and I worked at the same company. We tried to buy that company. Just another one of those things that God put in our life that didn't work out. Good thing it didn't, because we had to create our own identity and create our own products to survive. Our mission statement, when we were 2 guys out of a 1-car garage, and then in '98, like 6 months later, we bought a house that was built in the 50s over close to where my kids went to school. We bought it because it had a 2-car garage converted into a family room and was already air conditioned. So that was our lab. The formal dining room was another production room, packaging room. The kitchen, we would bake stuff in the oven. There's no telling, anyway, what that house what people that smell all that stuff was doing. But anyway, we're baking chemicals.
Point of the story, they were
things.
legitimately started in their garage.
Yeah,
The
so-
all-American story.
Yeah, so as a self-employed guy, we had to pay 14% interest to be able to buy that house in 1998. Thank God the market went up. We were able to get out from under it and move into a manufacturing facility a couple of years later. But I had pictures at one time in that house, in that garage. My kids, Elise was probably about 7. Garrett was probably about 4, something like that. Packaging product. Kids, when you do good at daycare or after school care, you get a sticker. So I had these inkjet labels for all these products shipping to America, and I had them sitting there. Hey, you get 1 million stickers today. You just have to take them off and put them on in a straight line so we can ship this stuff to American Airlines and get a check in the mail. So,
But you skipped some steps. So they were in the garage and they're trying to mix. So their very first application at American Airlines. So they're in corrosion business. I feel like you skipped that step. That corrosion. Their very first application, when the flight attendant...
In the business of preventing
I
corrosion.
hadn't quite gotten there yet.
So
but
they
anyway.
pull up to the gate. Okay, you haven't done there yet?
Oh, we invented a lot of products in Motel 6 and Super 8, places like that.
You remember, are you young enough to remember when they had like old time coffee pots in hotel rooms? Like the gold coffee pots.
Yeah,
The
basically.
gold ones? No, I don't remember
I
that.
don't remember the gold ones. No.
They're stainless steel.
They're instant coffee is
Aluminum.
all that I see in the hotel rooms.
They had a little coffee pot. You'd get about 2 or 3 cups of coffee out of it. And anyway, we had to prove that our gel that prevented corrosion.
we've skipped steps.
Oh,
We'll get back
good
to that.
Lord.
We'll get back to that. But I think it's
You
cool.
are dragging this out
I
more
know,
than me.
but there's so many cool steps that you don't hear these stories. So
all these steps are about. It goes back to
their very first
the glory of
application
God.
at American Airlines was on the peephole when
Well, I was
you pull up
getting
to
there.
the gate and the stewardess looks out the window at the door and she's like, okay, bring the...
That would be a flight attendant. You are not politically correct.
And what the
Stewardess
hell did
in
they-
fucking hot pants, working for Southwest Airlines in the 70s. Yeah, I want to
Okay,
see
the
some of
flight
those. The
attendant...
flight attendant could
brings
be a
the-
male or a transgender or a female.
Okay. Anyway,
Corporate
they
America.
tell you
Yeah.
to bring the...
So they're
Thing.
looking out this little window to get the cart up to the airplane. So that they were having moisture ingress problems. So we thought, hey, this is a good opportunity. It's not a flight critical thing. If our shit doesn't work, it ain't going to cause the plane to crash. So we're going to put a gasket that seals this little window viewer up.
Because it was fogging over and they couldn't tell the
Yeah.
jetway. What is it called? The jetway?
They couldn't tell if it was a
Not
woman,
the
a man,
jet-
or a transgender. That's what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was.
yeah. No, the jet,
Yeah.
not the jetway. The car, they load the food onto the plane on the door opposite of where you walk on the plane.
Okay.
So all the drinks, food comes on the plane. So anyway, they're trying to do that. I'm not sure why you're so worried about these details.
Because I think
but-
it's a cool story. So that's the very first application when the flight attendant's bring
So
it in.
these things are like gaskets today are probably the thickness of about 3 business cards stacked together, which is about roughly 45 thousandths of an inch, plus or minus 5 hundredths. But anyway, so we're making these gaskets and we are using gel, just like the gel that a rubber fishing worm is made out of. It's dry, but it'll stretch.
I have one
It'll
of my
snap.
first.
It'll snap back together. You've seen the toys that kids
Hold on.
throw up against the wall. It's sticky goo, sticks on the wall, creeps down the wall. But you're looking at, you're feeling that stuff, and you're like, "Wow, how am I? It's going to take paint thinner to get this crap off my hands." But there's nothing on your hands because those are all in the polyurethane chemical family. So we took those polyurethanes, made them sticky, but made them where you can make them flat to turn them into a gasket to compress between 2 pieces of metal. But to be able to compress them between 2 pieces of metal, you got to have a skeletal structure. So back at the Super 8 in Owasso, Oklahoma, which would be about 35 minutes south of where your sister lives.
Mm-hmm. Lovely place.
Yeah. Yeah, Wausau is just north of Tulsa, south of Anita. So we're in the Super 8 in probably 1998 or 1999. And we're like, how are we going to hold this sticky gel together? We have to have a skeletal member in the middle of it. My partner's like, hey, I took this stuff that my wife was using to dry her dishes on. It's kind of rubbery. I knew this rubber liquid would stick to it. So we make this first gasket, and it's probably like 20 times thicker than what we make them today. We thought more is better. That's not always the case. So
because, for the non-technical people, when you put the bolt through it, the point was moisture was coming in. You can't just put a bolt and expect there to be this looks dirty, but it's not.
It does look dirty. For some reason, I can't look away. Please stop.
Moisture's going to come through that hole through the aluminum.
It's getting worse,
and the
Andrea.
seal bolt.
Jeff, can you say God one more time just to offset this? Andrea's bringing
God
some things
Almighty.
in here.
Anyway.
And I think we got our Instagram clip for the first part of this episode. So thanks for that, Andrea.
Welcome. And I'm turning red now.
So
moisture comes in and creates corrosion. So they were trying to seal up.
Anybody that wants the details of how to seal up a bolt hole, I
He's
can
your
help
guy.
them out.
Yeah.
But it can't dry out.
But we don't have to
because
go
that was
into
the
all
old-
that. We
This we don't have
stop,
to
Andrea.
do.
Stop. You're screwing it all up.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah. No, so this is one of the end products here. You squeeze it between your fingers really hard, pull apart. Under compression,
residue.
30 inch-pounds on a VHF or GPS antenna on an aircraft. That creates a vapor-tight seal, no condensation between the two pieces of metal. Like on your battery post, especially back in the 70s, 80s, you had lead battery post, you had a steel bolt going through the lead battery post, and you'd see all this white powder. That's galvanic corrosion. But you have moisture present. You don't see that nearly as much now because they have the lead alloys closer together,
lithium batteries.
and they have a cover over the top of it. So if you don't have any moisture present, it's hard for that electrolysis to start. But that's basically what we do. We prevent the moisture from coming in contact with two dissimilar metals and starting the corrosion of the aircraft is what we do, whether it's on electrical connectors or under the floorboards that you're walking on when you walk into the galley or the lavatory, or the floorboards in the cargo bay. That's kind of the very short version of that story.
But there's some cool stories so they started.
Oh, the coffee pot. Back to the coffee pot. So we had to prove.
I was really invested in the coffee pot.
Okay, we had to-
started doing
Okay,
things
so-
with their hands, and I don't know what was going on.
So we had to prove that Skydraw, which is a trademark name of a hydraulic fluid in the airline industry, that's highly, I don't know, it eats everything it touches, except the hydraulic hoses, and that's about it. And there's your polyurethanes typically do not hold up to hydrocarbons or fuel-based products or hydraulic fluids or jet fuel. So we had to prove that but Skydraw was bad for humans to contact. It had the skull and crossbones on it.
Right.
So we had to go in the next morning. We're staying in this Motel 6. And we got to go in the next morning and prove that our stuff doesn't disintegrate. So we're like, what are we going to do? We got the mechanic to give us some Skydraw and slipped it out, to our hotel. We didn't have a container. We're staying in 39.
It doesn't sound much better when you
Back
say
door
it.
sounds better than the hotel. Sorry. Okay.
So anyway, we're staying in a room with two double beds, $39 a night, because we can't afford anything else. And we're not going to go to town. We're working 18, 20 hours a day. We're not going to go buy something because we couldn't buy it, and we didn't. So we just got the coffee pot, poured the Skydraw in the coffee pot, dropped it in there overnight, got up the next morning, pulled it out, It was still there. Took it and showed it to the guys. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, your stuff will withstand SkyDraw.
The tests don't work like that now.
Yeah,
Probably not.
Tests are a little more
There's
scientific.
like salt fog testers rotating in the lab. Like, things have come a long way since 20 years.
Yeah, we did a lot of tests like that. But we did a lot of stuff. And, you know,
I was telling them when we were at potty break that one of your other notable moments was when you became FAA approved.
She was telling me about that.
that was the original thing we went into business for, was wire harnesses. So we redid.
Which are, most people, I didn't know what wire harnesses were till I met you. It sounded like a German martingale, and that's not what it is.
Well, so you got wire harnesses running all over the aircraft, relaying information to different avionics systems, and you get flat position transmitters, aileron sensors out in the wing. So we redesigned and rewired the entire wire harness from the wing production brakes, from the edge of the fuselage where the wings attach, all the way out the wing of American Airlines MD-80 fleet.
Is this where your backup plan was to go bankrupt?
It wasn't a backup plan. It was like, that's just the way it's going to be.
Can I tell this part of the story?
Sure, you tell it all.
So they're back. So they had the wires screwed up. So the wings, like if you ever, I think everybody should go to Seattle.
We didn't have
Maybe
anything
not
screwed
now.
up.
No.
You said we had it screwed up.
No, American Airlines. So the fuselage goes on a train to Seattle. They don't build it there, and then the wings come in. I'm probably gonna screw this up, but just let it go because I'm. This is my part of the story.
Well, that
And
was
they
McDonnell
attached
Douglas
them-
and it's Long Beach, California, not Seattle, but whatever.
And they attach them at Boeing in Seattle. And so there's all these wires that have to, the wings have to work, the lights have to work. I mean, it's kind of important stuff.
It's kind of important for the pilot to know the position of the flaps
Yes.
and the aileron sensors.
And so, but I kind of am going to lose the story here where the wires can only be cut, like if they were getting corrosion in the wires where the connectors, like they meet up like this, and they were getting corrosion in that.
Similar to your connector on your trailer.
Yeah. And where that meets up was getting corrosion, and they couldn't figure it out. So they called in Corrosion General over here, and Jeff's like, well, I can fix that. But they're like, well, if you screw this up, you're going to have to put the airplane back the way it was. But his fix to it was this box, anti-corrosion stuff, cut the wires down. So there was no way in God's green earth to put the wings back the way they were so they could go on this airplane. And MD-80 cost $180 million. So backup plan B is like, we're going to have to file bankruptcy. I'm like, so that was...
Well, we had yet to make a profit. This was the fourth year of our company. We started in 97, and it was December 22nd of 2000. And we'd spent several months installing this thing. And our contract said we had to return it to its original condition. Well, they had fixed it so many times, they'd cut these things off. They wouldn't reach anymore. Even before we touched it, if you cut it off to fix it, it was going to be down for 6 months or a year to return it. And it was going to be $32,000 a day. Well, we'd have $3,200 between the two of us, much less $32,000 a day. And so they did a FAA flight test of our install, and because of the great people that helped us work on this project, in the years we put into it, we passed on. Actually, that was the 24th. It was New Year's. It was Christmas Eve of 2000.
The point is, if they wouldn't have passed, there was so many.
We'd have been out of business the next day.
They had to figure out how to make their first install at American Airlines. If that didn't work, they're out of business. And he's quit his job. He's homeless. And if the wings don't attach and this doesn't pass their flight test, they're $180 million in the hole. Like, that's bankruptcy. When
I don't know that I'd have been homeless. I had a tent.
And you had a Suburban. You had a Suburban with...
I'd lived out of a Suburban before I moved in with the Honeycutts.
Yeah, so I always heard, and that's a whole nother story about Jeff's big heart and his generosity. There was always these people that took him into their third-story loft. And I'm like, oh, my God, who are these people? Because now he won't be a hard-ass to anybody. He thinks I'm a hard-ass. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
Man, that's another story.
We're digressing.
Yeah, you're digressing, not me.
We're totally digressing. But that's a cool part of the story. You didn't end up going bankrupt. His idea worked.
It worked.
Because of a lot of people. A lot of hard work. My original partner was engaged at that time, and he and Kent Boomer, they did a lot of great work.
But then you also had to pass a FAA inspection somewhere along this line.
Well, this is like the Sting story. I know where you're going with this. So it's actually prior to that date. FAA was coming to inspect us. We're in this house built in the 50s that we're baking wire in the oven to make the wire straight and flat so you could get this product I showed you. Like, FAA is coming to see us. We're across from Tanglewood Elementary in Fort Worth in a 2-story house in a nice neighborhood. I don't think the FAA is going to like this. We better find some place to create a storefront. So we went to another guy that had left General Dynamics before I did, and he had a company, but he hadn't expanded enough to take up both buildings he had. And I'm like, hey, can you rent us this building? We got the FAA coming for an inspection. So I had my brother there. I had this lady that was probably in her 60s that picked my kids up from school. I had
your brother's wife. 2
or 3 other people there. So when you walked in, it was an old gymnastics, Lone Star Gymnastics on West Vickery in Fort Worth. When you walked in, there was these old school offices with plate glass windows in front. We took old computer mainframes, keyboards, monitors. None of them worked.
Phones.
Desk phones. We had people stationed looking like...
It was like they staged a home before staging homes were cool.
They were typing.
Answering the phone, taking orders.
Phone, acting like this was a real deal.
They didn't even work. They weren't even plugged in.
But they were coming to look at technical stuff, but we didn't want them to think we were 2 guys in a garage, which we were. So we passed the FAA inspection and...
Makes you feel really good about flying, right?
Hey, the product worked. We just didn't want any outside influences to cause them to miss the point of the engineering, and the product worked. So it's kind of like, what was that movie?
Rain Man?
No,
thank you. I was like,
No, the movie where they were creating the...
I'm going to need more details.
That was the movie where they were creating like a false scene.
More details.
Anyway, I'll figure it out later.
Okay.
I'll Google it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like a genre, not necessarily one movie.
Yeah, right. Thank you. But, there's so many.
The Sting. The Sting.
Oh, you said that earlier.
Yeah, The Sting.
Yeah, these are like chapters in a book. The Sting.
I'm trying to get him to write a book. Because it's crazy. We've only touched on stories.
God knows they could use a new movie idea. They keep remaking the same old shit.
Right? We've only touched on stories.
I would be too worn out correcting her versions of the story.
So there'd be 2 different movies?
Mine would be much funnier.
2 different movies, 2 different
His would be
books.
much more analytical.
Especially if you were directing the movie.
Yes, thank you.
I feel bad for
but
this.
Then it goes from there.
That'd be our life.
Then they... he hires. So I think some of the cool things about the story is the corrosion. So where they got American Airlines. We've heard about American Airlines. And so then when they got into the military, that was a whole nother egg to crack. And I only say this because every time one of those C-130s. I didn't know that the first year. Flies over Cheyenne Slack and spooks my horse. He's like, I swear to God, if you cuss that thing, you're going to have to load your shit up. And we're going to have to drive away from here because they're the only reason, they're
That helped put us on the map.
you are sitting here. The Cheyenne National Guard. But, wow, I lost my train of thought. The Coast
Red
Guard.
Bull, honey?
No, that's Crown and Coke.
Okay. Well, you need a Red Bull.
So, like, when they started, how they proved themselves in the military. So, every time they pull up a rescue swimmer from the ocean, there's
8.63 gallons of salt water that dumps in the floorboard of an H-60 Black Hawk helicopter.
So, salt water,
And
extremely corrosive.
I didn't create that data. The Coast Guard had that data in 2000 because they had massive corrosion issues in the structural components of all of their helicopters.
What's the framing on a helicopter? Is it steel or aluminum?
Aluminum.
With steel bolts.
So where you're standing,
Rivets? Is it huck rivets? Is that
no, it's basically in the fuselage, whether it's a helicopter or an aircraft. Most people don't really think about it, but you've got a pier and beam aluminum structure underneath the floors that you're walking on. Well, that's not only to hold the floor up, that's to keep the cylinder from collapsing under pressure in flight. So structural integrity is a pretty important thing. So you have limits of how much corrosion you can have on that structure. So you're running steel bolts with a captive fastener, steel fastener underneath that aluminum I-beam or T-beam or whatever it is that the floor is sitting on in that particular place. You can have moisture accumulating or it starts the whole galvanic process of corrosion. So
Back to my story.
anyway, back to our story.
I forgot what it was. Where were
It
we?
was about the corrosion in the helicopters.
Oh,
and
yeah.
all
So
the
that's
salt
how.
water.
So Dave Schmidt is his head of military sales now. So there's kind of two diversions because he was always in commercial sales, and then how they got into. He was trying to solve. Coast Guard had horrible, even though people don't think about it as a division of the military, it really is horrible corrosion issues because of the environment they were in. Saltwater all the time, and B, the rescue swimmers they were pulling up and dumping literally salt water on the floorboards. So when they called on him, or you went to see him, I don't know, to solve this issue, and then Dave Schmidt, who is the head of corrosion within the Coast Guard, saw that it actually, because they can, not only do they have antenna gaskets, they have floorboard tape, which I remodeled my horse trailer with.
Yeah,
I didn't know
expensive remodel.
it was a $50,000 remodel with a roll of tape. I just
Trying to keep the horse from kicking the damn something.
the divider from my reverse
She
load.
used all of my stuff out of my bag for all my free samples.
And he showed up and he's like, I don't know if I should be pissed or really impressed right now that this stuff stuck. But regardless,
It did well.
so Dave Schmidt ended up, because he saw how well, that's kind of how they got their foot in the door with the military. And he saw how much corrosion they essentially covered that helicopter in Avdec material. When he went in the military at 18, when he got out, at 20 years out?
Probably 17 and a half when he went in, but
So he had a full career in the military. Then he got out and he's working a full career with Avdec. But so he has a whole team under him that go out to military bases and Cheyenne. He went to Cheyenne. He tells the story. He lost his whole bag and luggage, but that's why we never got to check anything
don't
luggage.
check luggage.
Period. But so now an interesting story I think is pretty cool with Kay Granger. She is our local congressman, and she
My kid goes to our elementary school.
is
Congressperson.
whatever. Anyway,
Non-binary position.
thank
Andrea.
you.
I think Congressman and Congresswoman is fine.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
If Ty thinks it's okay, then it's okay.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's head of the Appropriations Committee, aka the purse strings in Congress, because Lockheed Martin is now one of our greatest defense builders. Is that right?
Whatever.
So anyway,
It's your story.
Yeah, this is my story. So anyway, she holds the purse strings for the Defense Department within Congress. So I think this is a pretty cool story. You know, they now have an actual facility. They don't have a stage facility. They're selling to American Airlines, and they have a facility over here on 1810 Money. 1810 Money. Can you believe I remember the address? Anyway.
Now, can you remember the time? Was the
Can
wind,
you add? Can
was
you
the
add?
wind coming from the west, or was it coming from the east?
What
Can
year
you-
was it?
Can you add 18 and 10?
That's not nice. However,
Everyone knows that's
28.
38.
Wait,
you.
wait. No, I misheard it. Sorry.
Everyone knows that's
Can
and
you
38.
just so
multiply
everybody
18
knows,
times 10?
I'm not like the flat wheel on this story. I was trying to come up. I'm a nurse. Went to
Yeah.
college on a volleyball skiller. I actually sent Ivy
Oh my God.
a rally on the U.S. volleyball team. I'm like, oh my God, you got to watch this rally because I played college volleyball. So
Andrea.
anyway,
Andrea.
Montana State. Ivy told me.
thank you.
Yeah.
So anyway,
She
Over-
thinks she beat Garrett and I in basketball when she first
I
moved down
did.
here, but
I
she didn't come close.
smoked you like
Oh my
30 to
God.
10, 2-on-1.
A 13-year-old, and I'm not sure how old I was, but we kicked her ass.
No.
D1, blah, blah, blah.
No. Anyway, so they were had a factory over there, and somehow Little League, friends. Moral of this story is like keep a Rolodex of people. Like life is about connections, and through connections of a guy that he coached his Little League kids said, hey, you really need to meet Kay Granger. Your stuff, I think she would be interested just because you're in her congressional boundary. And so they sent Kay Granger over for what was supposed to be a 45-minute meeting.
15,
15. She stayed for,
hour and a half.
okay. And so this is, was this at the beginning of Desert Shield?
Don't get
When,
me
so
talking
they
about it. It was
were,
around 2003.
so this product, or a similar product, on helicopters, so say a helicopter is out in the desert, very corrosive again, and they're talking about battle readiness, and can you take the story from here? Please.
Take a breath.
I was waiting for you to pick up, and you just
I'm
never rescued me.
I'm leaving you alone.
I think half of it is he just enjoys the way you tell the story. I just wanted to
That's
admit that.
it. I just love hearing you talk. I don't. Yeah, I love hearing you talk. I love listening, honey.
Thank you.
So no, the army had already done their own calculations of their return on investment studies, and for a mere $1,900 worth of our antenna gaskets on their H-60 helicopters, they would save $26,000 a year, which equated to $42 million a year. But the Department of Defense had gone from the place that the internet was created and all inventions came out of to being a big bureaucratic quagmire that things got stuck in. Didn't matter how good an invention you had in the 90s or the early 2000s, you couldn't get through the bureaucracy. And so we were showing Kay that the Army had their own calculations of an over 500% return on investment for using our stuff, and they had the data for over 3 years, and they still couldn't get it implemented. And they were short-staffed. Airlines were taking employees. These are after the Clinton years, and they were short on funds, short on assets for repairing aircraft. You'd have a set of aircraft that might be 8 aircraft in the fleet. They might have 3 that would fly because they've been robbing parts from all the others. So the timing was just, like I say, it's just all part of God's timing and God's plan. You know, any other time, a lot of these things wouldn't have had as much significance as they did during the time that they happened. But that's part of Kay Granger. Ended up, she left there where we had prepared and practiced this whole presentation to keep it to 15 minutes. And to keep me from going into way too many engineering details and practice, we're finished after 15 minutes and she keeps asking questions. So we're there an hour and a half. She leaves. So helping with morale of the factory employees, I want to give these employees, we're like, 5 years into the company and or I guess 6 years into the company. And I'll give these employees the same presentation I gave her. Call them in, give them the presentation to the factory employees and a few of the staff that are in the engineering office, and my cell phone rings. It's the old Motorola Microtech 2 flip phone. Pull the brick out. She's like, "Hey, Jeff, this is Kay Granger, and I want you to write a letter to the Undersecretary or the Secretary of the Navy, Gordon England, who used to be the head of Lockheed Fort Worth, General Dynamics. And I'm only going to tell you the first sentence, and in 2 pages or less, you sum up what you just showed me in the last hour and a half." Oh, okay. I can do that. First sentence was, "At the request of the Honorable Kay Granger, I'm writing you this letter." She said, "Do not send it to Gordon England. You send it to my office in D.C. I will sign it and hand carry it over." So I go back to my presentation to the employees, tell them what just happened. 5 minutes later, she calls me up and says, "Okay, I just need to tell you, it normally doesn't go like this. I need you to write a letter to the Special Assistant to the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld." And same thing, same story, first sentence comes from me. And we didn't get any direct money out of that. We didn't do any lobbying. We just helped the system that was killing itself, essentially. And they created some opportunities for different groups to request money. They didn't request money for buying our product. They requested money for the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, to get money to change all the documentation that they could use this product or this product. And because all the mechanics and all the engineers knew that the product would work. So that's the version.
But there was, and they call it battle readiness too. So what used to take a helicopter off an aircraft carrier out of service for...
Well, for the Navy's helicopters, every 28 days, the Navy H-60 would be out of service for 3 days. So if you got 8 of those, they're out of service for 3 days, you got 24 days out of the year that they're out of service. You essentially got a month. So you got to have extra helicopters to always have 8 available. So the Navy's version of that was even worse as far as the numbers turned out than the Coast Guard's, because they would pull one out of service every 3 days, every, 6 months, I think it was. So they went, put our product on, and they went 6 months, then they went 12 months, then they went 18 months, then they went 2 years without ever having to take these aircraft out of service because the product was solving the problem. And we finally asked the engineer, I'm like, this stuff might work for 5 years, but we really need to sell some more of it. So could you cut it off at 2 years? So that the return on investment was huge for in the airline industry. It was dispatch delays and reliability. In the military, it was battle readiness. So we did a lot of stuff for Desert Storm and a lot of things that weren't approved, and we gave a lot of product away. Long before the Coast Guard ever tried it, we were giving product away for the Gulf War. Guys were taking 50 cal rounds and patching the aircraft with our product and 2 pieces of metal so they wouldn't have to go back and take that aircraft out of service and do corrosion prevention. So we did a lot of stuff when we didn't have approvals for them to use it, but the military guys could spend up to $2,500 on their credit card. The mechanics could, to buy what they really needed to stay in the fight. And we met a lot of people, and through that I was never in the military. My dad was.
Can I talk?
But we developed some patriotic support for those guys and started traveling to Washington, D.C. a lot. And from that, we've created some other opportunities for kids to go to D.C. and do things like that and learn about what sacrifices have been done to create what the opportunities they have today.
Yes, that's a cool story. So obviously he has now a whole division of, it's AVDEC it's called Aviation Devices and Electronical Components. But if you ask Jeff, he says it stands for a very damn efficient company. However, so it's categorized into military commercial. But we go to DC one time, and I'm going to leave out when you threw me under the bus to be that person. But they have created an entire college for corrosion now based off of Jeff's company, because there was a whole department of the military of defense based off, and AVDEC was his poster child. Because
Rumsfeld created a corrosion czar for preventing corrosion, and of the first $17 million that they gave to 26 different programs, our program got $5 million of that 17, and it had such a huge ROI. It's still the poster child of that whole program. And there's universities that have now created corrosion prevention degrees on this same concept based upon what Rumsfeld did back in the day.
So that's pretty cool. So when I went to, I think Jeff and we now give back in places that, and I'm not saying this to by any means pat ourselves on the back, but give back in places and ways that people have no idea. I think Jeff's probably the most generous person I've ever met in my life, to the point of I'm like, okay.
To a fault. But when I went, I had never been to Washington, D.C., and I went with him. He had to go meet with Kay Granger, and they sent me with this driver around D.C., and I'm like, oh my God, this would have probably changed the course of my life. I'm absolutely grateful for the course I took, and thank God I had a nursing degree when he got sick. But I think so. We started a program where the 8th grade class out in Brock, Texas, we funded it for the first, I don't even remember how many years now. Several years.
First several years for the 8th grade class to go to Washington, D.C. And we're both conservatives, and I just felt like every child should see Washington, D.C. and the National Cemetery and the changing of the guards and the
Lincoln
Memorial and all these different things. And now it's kind of cool. We said we would match. So for the first several years, they did little car washes or whatever, and
sure.
we funded the rest of it.
They've been on their own for probably 10 or 12 years. And you put. I'm not willing to fund 100% of anything. Somebody won't put some sweat equity into it, I'm out. But I'll put the seed capital in, help people get started. If they'll take it over and run it themselves, I'll keep helping them. But thank God, those people have done wonderful with that program. They've done it on their own ever since. If it was up to me, every kid before they got their high school diploma would have to do a 3-day tour of Washington, D.C. And that's because of the people I came in contact with, guys that I was working with that were mechanics in the military and the Air Force. And all of a sudden, they start getting called out to Desert Storm. Some of them didn't come back. These are guys I'd known for years. And then I'm traveling to D.C. and I'm visiting the National Cemetery, and my dad had been in the military. It just seemed like the thing to do.
It makes a lot of sense, especially now.
Even more so now.
Yeah. So as Avdet grew, and we've both been blessed. I came into the story, I think, a couple of years after you made your first profit.
5 years, yeah.
And we got married.
I was living in a double wide when Andrea and I met.
I was like, sweet.
It was a
Engineer, okay.
It was a repo. I bought it for $23,000 repo. They had parakeets living in one of the rooms that had eaten through the walls, and we obviously had to remodel it.
It was nicely remodeled.
It was a Taj Mahal of double wides for sure. It was nice after we finished it, but it was a double wide out on a windy hill in Crescent, Texas. It was not an impressive location. Yeah, so people would say, "Oh, she married him for his money." I was not. I had no money when she met me. I'd mortgaged everything to buy this one horse that she came to look at and steal from me.
Anyway, we'll pass it. But then, we fast forward. They were making money. His partner started. Can I tell this part? Nope.
There was a hostile takeover situation in 08 and 09, and
but I had to sit
the good Lord had us weather that story.
I had to sit in the stripper parking lot.
No.
That sounds really, 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 really interesting.
I had to go just to get my partner's attention. Occasionally I had to go to have meetings. I had to go to New Orleans nights. She would sit outside and wait for me, and I'd go in, and we'd agree to a few things. I was running the company, and it's not a big deal. I mean,
is he a current partner or no longer?
Oh, no longer. My best friend of mine at Andrea's wedding is my partner. I met him through Little League.
Jeff was coaching Little League.
I wasn't coaching Little League. I was traveling the world over, and he asked me he wanted to recruit my son, Garrett, to play on his team, and asked me if I would be a coach figurehead so he would have my son as a protected player. And we started coaching together, and I learned a lot from him. And 10 years later, he helped me buy out the partners trying to steal the company. And we've been partners ever since.
We have the picture in our house. Like a conference table, long folding table, I guess it would be, or conference table. The priceless picture.
Talking about a picnic table?
We're talking about a table in Dallas at some real expensive lawyer's office.
Spent a lot of money at lawyers, but anyway.
Of all the documents we had to sign.
It was like a file folder, right back to back to back to back, that covered 3 rooms of the floor.
Guys, let me remind you how much we love Pendleton whiskey and how much you'll love it too. Here's the thing with Pendleton. It's not on every single shelf in the entire country. Sometimes you go to those small towns where the small rodeos are and you can't find Pendleton. That's where drizzly.com comes into play. Satisfy your inner cowboy by purchasing your bottle of Pendleton whiskey online. Buy it online at drizzly.com. Put it in the trailer. Pendleton blended Canadian whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Pendleton Distilleries, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And please drink responsibly. Yeah, I think so.
I didn't just suck in this whole story.
Exactly. Hey, Andrea.
What?
It's all about the good Lord that put us together.
Yeah.
It ain't about me. It ain't about you. It ain't about anybody.
I mean, I'm not Rain Man, but I'm not.
I'm not Rain Man either. I'm a far cry from Rain Man.
Yeah.
I'm just West Texas boy.
Yeah.
That's better than me. I'm basically Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, but without the brain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, fast forward, life was well.
We're boring the hell out of everybody, I'm sure.
Not at all. Now, it's really interesting because it gives people context in different things, and it shows people like what it was that actually made everything possible to be able to do all this stuff with. Everybody knows who Blazing Jetalina is with this whole horse program. I mean, it gives context, and also what it does for me, the biggest thing for me was to leave the horse industry, do something so I could come back to the horse industry instead of
Right.
trying to make the horse industry work for me, because that doesn't really work for most people.
Yeah.
Well, you understand it. You've been around it your whole life.
Yeah.
It's easier to come back into it where you're from. Nobody could do what you're doing if they didn't have the background you have.
No.
Yeah. And then he got sick.
4 years ago, you said?
Throat cancer.
Yeah, it's a whole other story. And, it's just about faith and the right people in your life at the right time. My business partner, Sue Smith,
We found
Scott
out when I
Honeycutt.
was at San Antonio at the rodeo.
February 20th of 17. We're at San Antonio, and we're supposed to be heading to Tucson. And I'd just been toughing it out since I had pain from June of 16 until then. I'd finally gone and gotten some tests because of this pain in my ear. And people need to pay attention to getting their kids vaccinated for HPV, and they need to pay attention if you got a lump in your throat and it lasts more than 2 weeks, you go get it checked out. Don't just I was it's a lymph node swollen.
Because you
I've
have
had this
tons
my
of
whole-
allergies.
I've had this my whole life. Just suck it up and be cowboy tough. Well, I almost waited too long, and thank God for Andrea and Mike Dry, and they're like, you can't just keep bearing this pain. You got to go get this checked out. And sure enough, it was cancer. They called me. We were supposed to be headed to Tucson. Tornado had hit San Antonio, and all the power was out at the airport, so we couldn't fly out. So we'd gone back to the room at like 5:30 or 6 and went back to bed. I'm up. She's asleep. And they call me and they're like, leave me a message. Hey, you need to call Dr. So-and-so. Well, I called. I knew something wasn't good because he usually always had somebody else give me the messages. They told me I had squamous cell carcinoma, and just all the miracles that lined up after that with the doctors that happened to be in Fort Worth that were some of the world's best. And my business partner had me in for an appointment with the best guy in Fort Worth, 11 a.m. the next morning, when my doctor couldn't get me in for 2 weeks, my internal medicine main doctor. And so the path we went on with Andrea being hyper competitive and having the nursing background and being able to do the research and stay on top of all the different mixed signals you get from different doctors and the thousands of people that were praying for us and just the energy we had to put into it. It was, Sue Smith, I'd heard her name. I'd never physically met her. I maybe saw her warming up or run once before, but I didn't really know her. She's now one of my best friends in the world. She had just finished treatment 2 months prior to me being diagnosed, and she mentored us, led us down the path. I never talked to her during the whole process until after my treatment was over. But
I talked to her.
if she had at least 1,000 texts and 500 phone calls between she and Andrea in like a 4-month period, if not more, of her telling us what to expect and leaving out some of the details because she knew we couldn't handle it at the time, but telling us what we needed to think of. But just our faith and the ability to put all of our energy into thanking God for the challenges that we have instead of saying, poor pitiful me, take this away from me. And we'd learned earlier during the hostile takeover opportunity what the scripture meant to us for thanking God for the challenges that he has us in and the dire straits that he has us in for what he's going to teach us in that moment. We may not understand it. We may never know what he taught us while we're here on the face of the earth. but we can respond one way or the other. And if we respond towards the challenge that God has us and we seek his wisdom, I believe we're going to be rewarded, and we're here for a reason. We're here to tell the story of what God's done in our life. It's not to raise horses or make jail gaskets or make money. It's to glorify God for what he's done in our life. And that's kind of where that path took us. And we were thanking God for the challenge of cancer, and Andrea probably wasn't really on the same page as I was. But I started thanking God and praying every night, thanking God for the healing.
And I absolutely meant physical healing.
And I would actually say...
And you didn't tell me till afterwards.
No,
no, you did not.
Okay, well, I told God that healing was, if it's physical healing for me, fine. But if it was spiritual healing for me that I needed, even better. If it's spiritual healing right now for people that are watching how we're handling this, or if it's spiritual healing 25 years from now when someone reflects on how we handled it, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to live through this. 20% of the patients die from the treatment alone. There's a high success rate of those that have survived for 24 months. There's a lot of people that came before me and after me that have gone through this. And, a lot of them were test patients at MD Anderson, and I came along at a time when the treatment's very brutal, and it was even more brutal years before me. So there's been a lot of people that have contributed to the success of this cancer treatment program.
I was so mad when he had to have 35 radiation treatments back to back to back, and I worked in the ICU and the ER before I met him, but then I hadn't been practicing, and he had to have, on top of that, chemotherapy once a week while he was going through that, which the chemo doesn't kill the cancer that he had. It only made the radiation stronger, and he had to be strapped to the table. It was brutal. Couldn't swallow, had a feeding tube, chemo port, the whole thing. And our radiation doctor, I love him dearly. He's here in Fort Worth, Dr. Barker. That's your shout out. But he's amazing. And he kept telling us, "You're doing great. You're going, you're doing this first class." And I'm like, "Okay, first class. Warm towels, hot peanuts, like first class." I noticed he had a feeding tube, and he had just finished treatment. And 2 days later, I noticed a little red streak. I'd clean his feeding tube every night and put a bandage around it. And I noticed this little teeny red streak moving away from it. And I knew his white cell count was literally almost zero. And I'm like, oh, so it was 11 o'clock at night or something. I went out and called the on-call number for the chemotherapy lab, and it happened to be our doctor, and he's like, "You need to go to the ER." And I'm like, oh my God.
Infection?
Mm-hmm. So I went in and told him, and oh my God, I look back at pictures now, and he looked horrible. And long story short, he had cellulitis around his feeding tube, and we ended up spending 8 days in the hospital. And when he came out of the hospital, he weighed 148 pounds. He looked like a little prisoner of war. And,
she saved my life getting me to the ER. And then she saved my life, months in advance. And the good Lord put the wisdom there and her ability to recognize those things. And, I basically was in a medically induced coma. I'll probably get the number wrong, but I had a lot of fentanyl patches, enough fentanyl patches that would kill any of us today if we had them on our body. But I was in so much pain. Had all these fentanyl patches on me, and they were giving me diflucan for essentially hoof and mouth disease in my mouth and throat. And because that could have killed me. Thrush, same thing, hoof and mouth disease. You want the other name of the medication too?
No, okay.
Fluconazole. Okay, well, anyway, whatever. So I've learned a lot more. I couldn't spell biology if you spotted me the BIO, and did the phonics on the ology part prior to this, but she's my biology person. So anyway, she figured out the interaction of the two drugs that had basically put me in a medically induced coma unintentionally. And
Or a
she
bolus on the
started pulling all this stuff off within probably 8 or 10 hours. You know, I was coming back, and within, I think, 16 hours, I checked out of the hospital. And then we had another incident after we got out of the hospital, but probably 3 or 4 weeks after I was out of the hospital in June of 17, I got to meet my guardian angel, Sue Smith, and Kyle, and they came to see us in Steamboat. She gave me even more encouragement about getting rid of my feeding tube and taking the next steps in the process of healing. And so I'm very blessed to have so many people directed by their faith that were there to help me out. So.
Hell yeah. I like it.
So little sister Ivy came to live with us pre-cancer.
Yep. I remember. Only time I've ever been to your guys' house.
Which time?
Pre.
Only time I've been to your guys' house was
yeah.
at the American 2016.
She was living upstairs.
Yeah.
It was then.
Yeah.
Quote unquote adopted her. She lived with us. And
The
we still
weird word,
consider her ours
even though she's
via some tough love.
Thank God for
she does need it.
Thank God for Ivy. Thank God times 10 for Billy Jack.
That's no shit.
It was, she
I love
came to
them
live
both.
with us. Tough love, Billy Jack. She can live with us anytime she wants.
She'll keep you entertained for eternity, so it works.
That's a funny human.
That's one of the funniest. Yeah.
Very funny human.
If I could just ever get her to have a cocktail with me, she might even be funnier. I've never seen her have a drink.
What?
Were you talking about Ivy?
What?
Does she drink?
No, it's against her faith.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought.
Yes.
She'd be real funny if she ever had alcohol.
No, I don't think not ever.
No.
Nope, not her.
We are very happy for her.
As are me.
Yeah.
That would be
Very happy.
as are me. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm no grammar expert, so I'm not.
It's just another way to say it, Jeff. Don't
Yeah.
be too critical.
I'm not. I'm
Get
not.
so technical, Rain
not.
Man. Tone it down, Rain Man.
June 2nd,
As are me.
7:54 p.m. Cool breeze from the east.
Yeah.
Podcast
Right?
over. We'll reference this one day. Maybe Ivy will have a beer.
I want to be there.
Yeah.
I'll pour it for her.
Yeah. Maybe one day. Probably be the same day she gets rid of the cap and bonnet. I thought that one would get a laugh. I guess not.
I know where you're coming from now.
I was waiting for it.
I didn't want to laugh at that one.
I'm not going there.
I'm not
Sometimes I
going
want your
there.
jokes to fall flat.
That's
I'm not
a
going
brother.
there. That's a brother-sister thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually my jokes don't fall on deaf ears. You guys are very
I
judgmental.
love all three. I love all three of the Conrado kids. So I'm not going to pass judgment.
You shouldn't.
No.
That's a whole nother podcast.
You're telling me you don't have a favorite?
So it's Ivy.
Oh,
Well, it's got to be Ivy.
Yeah, they spend the most time with
No.
Ivy.
No.
no.
It's got to be Ivy.
I'm not picking favorites.
Oh, sorry. Ivy's
Ivy-
not my favorite either.
Ivy looks like her brother. Paige is hysterical too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Paige is funny. In like a tortured soul kind of way. It's different.
Man, Paige is my buddy. She helped me drive.
Paige
She
is
slept a
mess.
lot. She slept a lot, but that's another story.
Yeah,
When she wasn't sleeping, she would help drive. She's good.
she is. She's unique. I like Paige.
I like Ivy's story because it's similar to Jeff's
Yeah.
in a rodeo corporate kind of way. Like, we saw, I mean, I think Billy Jack thought she was full of shit, you know, like, and then
I'm pretty sure Billy Jack still knows she's full of shit.
no, like some of the,
Billy Jack just
Those-
walks away.
yes,
He knows she's full of shit.
but some of her darkest days, like, it was not pretty. It wasn't pretty.
No.
And we lived some of those days with her, and
Oh, I remember crying on our way back from Lovington, New Mexico. That 2-horse trailer of hers is badass. Does she still have that?
No, Kelly's got it.
Let's stop. Anyway,
That's awesome. She made the best of it.
Her rough year was Jeff's sick year.
2017, yeah.
And I got a few phone calls, and I'm like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, kiddo.
Yeah, this is what we got going on. I don't want to hear it.
And literally, I didn't tell her that, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, suck it up, buttercup.
She needed that. We all need that sometimes.
She didn't get what I think she thought she was going to get. And look, no, everybody's okay. She's in a good place.
Everybody
I'm proud
is.
of her.
Same.
And love her.
So leave it at that.
I feel like this
Before
whole
you dig a big
podcast
hole.
is about you and how cool you are. And I don't typically have turquoise fingernails.
I'm not cool.
It's not normal?
No.
She normally doesn't have fingernails.
You're right. It was the turquoise fingernails that threw the whole thing off for me. It's why I didn't ask you more questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. If they were any other color, this would have been a different podcast.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it would have been all about you if they'd have been red.
Yeah. He's
They were
right.
seafoam. We just went on a little birthday vacation for me that we don't do.
Yeah.
I thought it looked beachy.
It does. You got the Valley Girl thing going on with the polo shirt and
Thank you.
the
I
turquoise.
thought it looked beaching.
It does.
Beachy. Beachy.
Yeah. Bitchin' beachy.
She been beaching at me. That's a whole nother story.
Don't ask
That was
if
the
he,
least politically correct thing you said all day. That's a
Don't ask him
I
about his
just said
Mexico.
she been beaching at me.
Terrible Peter.
Sunny Beach.
He's actually. Why I feel like I've bragged on you all night, but he's really good at impersonations.
really.
Just because
Yeah.
no, I'm not very good
Yes,
at
you
it.
are.
I grew up with.
Working in the cotton fields.
It was no big deal.
It's no big
They
deal.
they make fun of my West Texas slang, and we made fun of their not being able to pronounce their CHs. And
Ask him a Mexican word of the day.
What is a Mexican word of the day?
Come on, Chance.
Ask him a Mexican word
Yeah.
of the day? Cervezas.
no.
That's terrible.
We got to ask him a Mexican word of the day.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I was probably 52 before I knew Mexican wasn't spelled Meskin.
Mexican.
In West Texas, it's Meskin. And I grew up with them, went to school with them, and we were best buddies. We went to the stock shows together. Nobody really cared. And, but anyway, so you create this language, West Texas Meskin. So I give you an English word, and you got to turn it into West Texas Meskin. So what's the best, one of the most easiest ones I can do? You want to buy the cheapest?
Oh, this is terrible. Don't do this one.
You got to
Fine.
come up with
No,
one.
I can't.
You want to buy the cheapest dozen eggs you can buy at the store, right? Cheapest. So use the word cheapest as a Mexican word of the day. You got to put it in context.
I want the sheepiest eggs.
Nah, my wife Andrea, she called me from the Lubbock, Texas, from the ABC rodeo. And she on Sunday, they won the rodeo. She was so excited, she pissed her pants.
Seriously?
You might want to cut that part.
Well, I don't think so.
I'm going to say so.
Yeah, cut that part.
Well, save it for Patreon. We'll put
Can
it behind
you
a
make
paywall.
it sound like I'm cool in this video too? Or am I
You
just
are
like,
cool. You won the damn rodeo.
Oh, okay.
You were so excited, you
Beast or pants?
she pissed her pants.
I hope not.
I got something a lot worse than that.
I need a new talking point.
I'm still trying to figure out where the eggs went. I'm still waiting for the eggs.
Well, it wasn't nothing about eggs. It's just like
Cheapest.
you want the cheap. You want to
You
buy
want
the cheapest thing.
Crown Royal? You want the cheapest?
Cheapester pants.
So I was fixated on the eggs.
No. You got to
cheapest.
come up with
The cheapest thing you can buy. So use the word cheapest. She was so excited. Cheapester pants. Cheapest.
God, Jeff.
I get it. It's
Yes.
like the memes on Instagram. I know
Yes.
we've come full circle. That's where
Thank
this
you.
came from. You didn't
Yes.
create this. Someone did on Instagram. And they got
Exactly.
paid a lot more money for it.
But can you do it in the Mexican accent?
Me?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Let's hear it.
But I would use the same word, cheapest.
Any word. Just Mexican. He's like, oh, she's not a very good teacher.
Busby, your piece of Chevy. I'll run you in my Charger.
It is a pretty good Mexican accent.
There you go.
Yeah.
I grew up with too many of them. Too.
Yet he's
cheap.
making your airplane fly safely.
That's true. Well, Busby's?
Thank
our story.
God it's over. Cut that last part.
I don't think so.
That's our story.
Yeah.
All right, restart with by the way you were saying for closing, Chance.
No, that was the close. We started the close.
Cheapest.
Yeah. This is the cheapest podcast I've done today.
Listen,
You are the cheapest podcast
Oh
guest I've
my
ever had.
God.
Totally been demonetized.
this is the cheapest drink I've had all day. It's free.
It was free.
I don't feel like this is publishable.
It is. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is not like other shows, and we kind of just do what we want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could come back on this show.
You
This
could.
is like Johnny Carson.
Yes, it
You guys
is.
are way too young to know what Johnny Carson is.
This has been The Gauge, hosted by me, Chance Conrado, produced and edited by our guy Ty Yeager. Shout out to the executive producers Dustin Pointer and Cody Denton. Marketing and content produced by Riley Chone. Make sure to rate and review this podcast, as well as follow The Gauge on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure to subscribe to The Gauge wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys next time.